My name is Rachael Mwine. I am a broadcaster by profession. I am a communications consultant as well. And I am married. I'm a content creator. I create content on YouTube and on Instagram. Instagram, I feel like, is more of a personal platform. I've been married almost 12 years. And together with my husband, we have two boys. And I'm excited to be on Just for Women Africa.
What inspired you to start the Good Wife YouTube channel?
I was inspired to start The Good Wife really from my own marriage journey. Like I said, I've been married almost 12 years now. And the first 6 or 7 years of my marriage were tough. I think just like many married people, when you're trying to figure out how to live with someone and how to uh, merge your lives and become one, like it was declared in church when you got married, it can be hard, because we're very different. Men are different from women. We grew up in different backgrounds. And so trying to come together to create a family is very difficult. My husband and I had, some bumps, some big, some small along the way. And when I reached the end of myself, I knew I didn't want a divorce because I didn't really have grounds for divorce. But I also knew that that's not what I wanted for myself. Um, and it was in that reflection that it came to me that having a relationship with God is what is going to resolve the issues in my marriage. And that's the path that I took. And somehow things started to align as I focused on my relationship with God and my devotion to Him. And so when I realized that there was change happening in my marriage because of that, I felt led to share those ideas and the lessons that I had learned with other women because I saw my marriage change right before my eyes. And so I figured other women could benefit from the things I have learned. Let me create this platform to, help them and help marriages.
What were some of the challenges you faced during the early years of your marriage?
A lot of our challenges were really on difference in opinion, difference in how you approach life. Um, Managing conflict, I think, was one of those issues that my husband and I dealt with. The way I like to handle conflict, like most women, is to talk through things, to talk through issues. And I always found that sometimes my husband maybe just didn't want to address an issue, or, the way I felt like an issue has been addressed is not the way he felt like the issue should be addressed. And so we always clashed along those lines. For us, it was mostly conflict, managing conflict, resolving it for us then to continue the relationship. So you found that there were periods in our marriage where would go days without speaking, or we we think we have handled an issue, but it's still somewhere marinating, only for it to explode. And so I think that our biggest challenge was managing conflict because of our differences, and that created a lot of friction along the way. We had a lot of unresolved issues, and eventually they erupted. I think at the 6th or 7th year mark, that was our saving grace because when they erupted, we were able to sit down and actually have a conversation. Um, but also the work that I had been doing in terms of building my relationship with God kind of brought to the surface what I needed to do to heal, to forgive, to extend grace. I think I also had a very, I don't want to call it skewed, but I thought of myself as almost perfect and not in a bad way. I'm like, I'm a good girl. I was raised in a good family. I was raised in a good home. Uh, I think anyone would be lucky to be married to me. But I think that kind of elevated myself over my husband. And so I wasn't extending as much grace to him as I should have, overlooking offenses and forgiving much, which are very good pillars for any marriage.
Did you notice any of these challenges while dating your husband but chose to ignore them?
I mean, you're very right. Yeah. When you're dating, when you're having a relationship with someone before you get married, there are things that you'll see. But I think often we tell ourselves, I really love this person. I see myself living with them. I see myself building a life with them. And so you overlook them, some of it out of negligence, maybe, if that's the word I could use, because maybe the right thing to do when you're dating is to address the red flags, let's call them that, or the issues that you see that could potentially cause even more conflict. Um, but I also need to tell our audience that, when you're relating, especially when you get married young, I got married at, I think I was 28 at the time. And often in your 20s, you're still being formed as an adult. You're still trying to figure out a lot of things, how to relate with people. There's a level of maturity that for many you haven't attained. And so the idea that you should resolve certain things before you get married doesn't really occur to you, because you are in the love phase, and love conquers all. And so when you get into marriage, it's an opportunity for you to grow. If that's the way you look at it, then you can overcome the challenges. It's also an opportunity for you to address those issues. Hopefully, they are not as big, to cause divorce or separation. But you're very right. I think that before you get married, you do see the red flags. And I mean, I saw some. My husband and I used to have conflict even before we got married. And I don't think we had a healthy way of resolving conflict, which kind of spilled over into our marriage. But thankfully, we are still here, and we found a rhythm and a way to work through a lot of that.
Now, during those challenges, did your husband ever express how he felt, and was divorce ever on his mind?
Absolutely not. Divorce was never in his plan. Again, back to the way men are wired and women are wired. I think for me, and again, this probably also goes to my personality. The way I saw life is, if I'm not resolving conflict, my life is over. I'm that dramatic. Whereas my husband is like, oh, we have a little conflict, we're going to be fine. There's more road left for us to handle this relationship. So, and I bet you'd agree that most men think like that. It's just a small fight. It's just a small disagreement. I'm going to watch my football match and I'll be fine. I'll come back. And this is my person. We are here for life. Whereas for me, I'm like, the house is on fire. How can you not see it? That's the difference between men and women. And in my case, the difference between me and my husband, that for him, it was cool. It's like, we're going to be fine. We're going to resolve this issue. And so in entertaining the divorce thought, it's not something that I thought about for long. I didn't allow it to linger in my mind, because when I got married, I knew I had done this for the long haul and there was no getting out for me. Um, but it's something that I thought about. I was like, if we separated, would that be such a bad thing? Because clearly the way we are seeing conflict is very different, from each other. Yeah. So there's a huge difference between men and women. And I think if we appreciated it, we would come together as opposed to separating. We would come together and just reason out our differences.
In your opinion, what is the right age for a woman to get married?
So that's a very maybe subjective question. I think that I'll answer it this way. I think that there is a lot of value in getting married late, quote unquote. So what society calls late, I'm talking after 35. Obviously, we have things like biological clock in the picture, so you can't really play with time like that if you have the opportunity. Uh, but I have found, because on the show, I have talked to people who got married late, quote unquote, um, 35 and above, talking 38, early 40s. And I have found that as you grow older, as a woman, there are a lot of things that you learn, you mature, as you grow older, that the things that would have created tension in your marriage, if you were, say, 22 or 23, 25, 28, like myself, will not really be an issue, because you have kind of gone through the motions. You have had altercations with friends. You've been in the corporate space, perhaps. You've worked in business. You've dealt with relationships and the intricacies of relationships. That when you get into marriage, you're more settled, you are more grounded. Um, and so you're able to navigate, the issues in marriage as they come with a level head. Whereas in your early 20s, it's like I'm just beginning life, Some I remember I look back on the early years of my marriage, and a lot of the way I behaved was just immature, plain and simple, emotionally driven. And as women already, we're emotional. And I really banked on my emotions. I acted out of emotion. But I feel that as you grow older, you learn that your emotions can mislead you. Your emotions can cause you to make the wrong decision, cause you to say the wrong thing, which then you can't take back and can cause irreparable damage to your marriage. So, I mean, if God brings a husband to you at 22, 23, I'm not saying chase him away, but marriage is really a space for you to grow. And if you go into marriage with that attitude, even at 23, you can make it work. But I feel that for women who do it after 35, you've learned so much that you kind of skip all the drama that those of us who got married younger experienced.
How can somebody gain meaningful relationship experience at 35? Would you advise dating multiple people before settling down?
You may not even have so many relationships to learn from. And I wouldn't advise that you go around dating so many people so you can figure out what works for you. I think that learning from there's so much that I learned even from my platonic relationships that I apply in my marriage. It's grace, it's patience, it's understanding, it's offering kindness. And those are things you learn from your day to day life. You learn them in the workplace because in the workplace, we have co workers that are difficult. We have co-workers that maybe don't want to resolve issues. And so it's in understanding that space and learning from that experience. Those lessons can also be applied in a marriage. So I don't think that we should live life in isolation and say marriage is over here, my relationships are over here. Yes, they are separate in the sense that they are different relationships, but I think that the principles that guide them can cut across. And so I don't think I would advise that you get married. Rather, you have different relationships. I think just accept the lessons that life is bringing you, and if you have more of a growth mindset in the sense that everything I'm experiencing in life is teaching me and preparing me to be a better person and to be a better individual, then those lessons can be transferred even to your marriage and then even to your parenting journey, when you do have children. I think most of marriage is really just hinged on being a good person. And what does that mean? Being a good person means you're constantly learning, you're growing. You're saying, last year I was not very patient, but now I am a little more patient. I have grown in patience. I have grown in extending grace. I have grown in forgiveness. And I think if all of us looked at life that way, even at the workplace, just knowing that I want to be better, I want to be less angry. I want to be less emotional, or leaning on my emotions to guide me. I feel like the world would be a better place. Marriages, families, everything.
What is your opinion on pre and post marriage counseling? Do you think it's important?
So I really think that marriage counseling plays a big role. However, the approach before you get married and after you get married is very different. I remember I don't remember much of premarital counseling. I remember that it was very well packaged, and they told us about all sorts of things, how to handle in-laws. We talked about sex, we talked about finances, we talked about our intimacy as a couple. But I really believe that when you get into marriage, you should continue some sort of post counseling or post marital support, because now you are engaged in the practical. You're living with this person and you're dealing with conflict. You're dealing with, um, let's say, in laws, you're dealing with friends or external forces, so to speak. So while premarital counseling plays a big role, I think that every couple should have, whether it's community, another couple that they are working with post marriage, to now help them navigate and deal with the things that they are actually facing. When we did our premarital counseling, obviously I was not living with my husband. So a lot of the stuff just sounded really nice. It sounded like we were doing this marriage course. There were things that we learned. It was apparent that we are very different. And a lot of the things that they told us we actually experienced in our marriage. It's just that it's different when you are being told this is what you're going to experience versus you actually experiencing it in the marriage. So I think that while premarital counseling is great just to set a foundation and let you know that this is what you should expect, remember at that point couples are puppy-eyed, we are in love and, we are planning the wedding. So we're not really paying attention. There's all these wedding activities going on around us. And I think what is happening now with churches is they are doing longer sessions of counseling. So rather than do 3 months before the wedding, some churches are doing like 6 months to a year before the wedding. Yeah. So you have 6 months worth of you can't handle 6 months to a year, yes. To really test your resolve, but also just so that there's no background noise of, wedding planning and the wedding plans, so that you're present, to understand and just take in all the information they're giving you. But I support postmarital counseling, maybe even over pre.
Would you advise a married woman to stay at home and not work, or do you think it's important for her to have a career?
The way our world is set up now, it's difficult for you to live on a one income household, or rather on one income. Things are just very expensive nowadays. Things are almost it's difficult to survive on just one income. And I think that many women are also more and more coming out into the workspace with the shift in society. More women now having careers and thriving careers. You have women also in top management positions. It's almost frowned upon if a man says you should stay at home and not work. And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, that dynamic is a bad thing, because there are women, and I watch a lot of content online where a woman has decided to stay at home, raise the children. And so I think it's a case by case basis. Every family makes a decision like that for a number of reasons. And I don't think we'll ever know all the reasons. So usually I'll hear people say, my husband has said I should stay at home. And they don't like the idea of staying at home because maybe they feel suffocated. They feel like their husband is trying to control them. That may be true. It may not be true. They are issues of infidelity because a husband feels like if my wife goes out, they are going to be unfaithful. That speaks of insecurity on his part, or maybe he has reason to think that way. I don't know.
Would you advise couples to live together before marriage?
Absolutely not. That's not something that I would advise anyone who comes to me for advice to, cohabit or move in together before they get married. I think that marriage is a journey. It's you make the commitment first and then get in and resolve to work through the issues together after the commitment. I think if you say to yourself, let me do this so that I I can make sure I alleviate any conflict or learn if this person is actually right for me. You, I don't really think that that's the best approach to marriage or to even having a relationship with someone. And I know that, different people believe different things. There's somebody that I work with who says that once you do that, especially if you're a woman and you want to be married eventually, that when you cohabit, you kind of take away your power and your negotiating ability. What does she mean by that? It's that if marriage is something that you want, then you have settled. And if this person, your husband or your partner is getting marriage benefits without the commitment, then there's no reason for him to say, let me marry you, because you are taking care of him, you're taking care of the home, you're behaving like a married person, you're intimate, you're having sex. And so what's the point in putting a ring? That's where now the whole commitment is trivialized. Like, marriage is overrated. It's just a ceremony. And then it costs a lot of money, especially in our culture here in Africa. So if I can have all of that without the commitment and without the hassle of, planning a wedding, then I'm going to do that. And so if marriage is something that you desire, I don't think that you should cohabit. I think that you should press for a commitment and then get married.
What advice would you give to women who feel trapped in their marriages?
I think that there's going to be often times in life where you feel unfulfilled for whatever reason. What you do in those moments is very crucial. I think I would advise for moments of stillness. If you feel like you have looked for help and you are not getting the help that you need, maybe you're not fulfilled as a person. That doesn't mean that you should leave the marriage. It simply means that you should try and look for meaning, purpose, fulfillment for yourself as an individual. And for me, the best place to do that is in having a relationship with God. If you can do that and find meaning and fulfillment within yourself, then I think a marriage, you can make the marriage work